Hey guys, welcome back to Creativity and Inspiration. If you're new, welcome. And if you've been here multiple times before, you know you have my heart. I'm so excited everyone is here today. This is new and different ideas for dyeing paper. And there's nothing to do but jump into this video. Oh, you might occasionally hear some hard rain or thunder because it's a very gloomy day outside today. Have all my notes because I don't want to forget anything. And we're going to start with the type of paper. What is the best type of paper to dye? And basically it is either copy paper, the cheapest copy paper or printer paper that you can get, or blank newsprint. And the reason both of those are excellent choices for dyeing is they are thin. Now, you can also use cardstock if you wish. It's, a little stiffer, so it would have to sit in the solution longer, but that's okay because it is stiffer. It can sit in the coffee, tea, or whatever longer. The copy paper, printer paper, or newsprint paper is thin, and when it gets wet, it tears easily. So you can dip it in many times, but to get a nice dark color, it needs to be dipped, dry, dipped, dry. It's a process to build up how dark it gets. And of course, you can dye any other type of paper or fabric that you wish. Now, before we get into the actual dyeing part, let's talk about drying. How are you going to dry your paper once you dye it? There are only two ways. In the oven, not in the oven. Not in the oven can be outside, let the sun do it on a bright sunny day, or during winter you would have to put it in your garage or a corner of your kitchen and let the heat from your home dry it over time, which will take longer. But that's always an option, and that is a good option if you use some of the materials I'm going to talk about in just a moment. If you want to do it in your oven, I always do it at 200 degrees, and I stand right here and watch it. Okay, so what can you dye your paper with? Well, we all know that you can use coffee, and this is the only coffee, and it hasn't been drunk in a year, so it's probably old. That's why I use it, because I normally wouldn't use expensive coffee. In fact, all coffee is expensive now, and we're going to talk about that. I guess we'll do that now instead of jumping into dyeing. With food prices so high, I'm going to give you a bunch of options to naturally dye your paper using food and vegetables, but with prices so high, this may be something you choose not to do. And I totally get it, because grocery prices have gone through the roof, and you want to consume what you purchase, not use it to dye paper. So I'm also going to give you some new, different ideas for dyeing your paper that are non-food beverage related. But first, of course, I'll go over all of the ways you can dye using food. Okay. So, again, the good old how it started, tea and coffee. Tried and true, works great. And I've done a couple of videos on this, and I'll put a card here, and then I'll make a suggestion at the end of the video as well. Other beverages you can use to dye paper are Kool-Aid, which I have none, or if you are a no kids household, something like Crystal Light, or a brand with the coloring in the color packets, anything like that. That works. You can use hot chocolate. This is a neat way to dye, but again, it's expensive, but it does smell good. If you really want to get crazy, you could use matcha green tea. I wouldn't dare, but definitely that's an option as well. And none of this is sponsored by anything. This is just me giving you recommendations. After you get out of the beverages, and again, the beverages could be like orange juice, cranberry juice, anything that's liquid that has a color would work. And for any scent that you do that you don't like, you can always add a teaspoon of vanilla to perk up the smell, or at least to kind of neutralize the smells. Now, a next popular way to dye paper naturally is to use the skins of some fruits and vegetables. And one is the yellow onion. If you dye with the skin of the yellow onion, you get yellow. A purple onion, you get a blue color. And again, this is the skin, not the actual meat of the onion. The onions, you'll peel, you'll put the skins in water, make sure they're covered by water, and boil on low for 30 minutes to an hour. The longer everything boils, the deeper the dye, the color of the water will become. For your avocado, it's the outer skin and the pit inside. Again, you put them in a pot, you cover them with water, you let them boil for an hour to get a nice deep color, and it's pink. And I'm not going to show you that one today because my avocados are rock hard and it would just be a waste of an avocado. Now, another way to do it is with spices or seasonings. Again, the pricing probably does not make this a good idea, but I do want to mention it. If you have anything old in your pantry that has expired that you could possibly use, or in your spice rack, then I would use that. But you could use red pepper. You put it in the water, you bring it to a boil. That way a lot of the red pepper will dissolve and you'll have the color, which is kind of a reddish brown. And you can use curry powder or turmeric to get a nice yellow. Again, you put it in the water, you let it boil. The longer it boils, the deeper the yellow color. Also, the longer you let your paper sit in any of these, the deeper the color will be. You can add Worcestershire to water to get a dark color, as well as balsamic, but it doesn't smell very good. So this would be one that I would add a little vanilla to neutralize. Okay. That is all the food options. What about non-food options? Of course, you can use food coloring. You can use acrylic paint. That's right, acrylic paint is a water-based paint. So you could put a little acrylic paint in some water, mix it in very good, dip your paper in, leave it as long as you like, and pull it out. If you want it darker, you can try leaving the paper, let it dry, put it back in, that method, or you could add more acrylic paint, stir it up, and use that, and I'll demonstrate that one in just a bit. Also, you can use inks. Put inks in water, just like food coloring, dip your paper in, let it sit for however long you wish, or if you're using, printer paper, you're going to want to put it in, let it soak for a few minutes, take it out, let it dry, put it back in and out again. Another way is you can mix paints with shaving foam, put it on top in a pattern, mix it into the shaving foam, and it'll still get a really cool pattern. You could put ink in the shaving foam as well on top and put your paper on top, and again get a really cool pattern. You can actually put old eyeshadows in a boiling water and then dip your paper into that. If you have eyeshadows that you know are old, you certainly don't want to put old eyeshadow on your eyelids. You scoop all the eyeshadow out of the pan, You put it in water, you bring your water to a boil, stirring so the eyeshadow disintegrates, and then you have something to dye your paper in. Of course, with some of these, the Worcestershire, the balsamic, some of the powders like if you use a matcha powder or a hot chocolate powder, if it doesn't melt all the way, the eyeshadows, you might have some granules. I had that problem when I did the curry powder. It didn't dissolve all the way in the boiling water, so there were granules. If they dry all the way, you can try brushing them off, or it adds a unique texture to your paper. It's really personal preference how you feel about little granules being on your paper. Okay, let's talk about designs. Maybe you've been dyeing paper for a while and it's great, it's fine. You know, you do it in the summer, you dye a whole bunch to get you through the winter, but you're kind of getting tired of plain dyed paper. What can you do? Well, one option is, and this is our no oven option, and you'll see why. One of our no oven options, and you'll see why in a minute. Use a white or a clear crayon. Again, not sponsored by any particular brand. Draw any design or just squiggles, whatever you want, on your paper, and it can be post-dyed like this, or it could be a new sheet of paper like this, whatever you want. Once you get it dried, let it sit for about 15 minutes, and then dip it into whatever you're dyeing with. And again, how much you want the design to show up, just how many times you dip it. And to make sure the design is really on there good and it's going to show up, press down, make sure you're getting, a lot of the wax or the crayon, whatever you're using, on the paper. But being this is wax, or you use wax, you do not put that in your oven for obvious reasons. Another way to get patterns on your paper is to take, again, and all of these can be done on already stained or non-stained paper. You take your paper, you dip your cup either end and set it on the paper like you used to when your mom or you yourself would drink coffee and it'd be kind of messy and you'd put it down on a newspaper or something, okay? You can also use a cookie cutter. You just have to use the fatter end, and if you can see, this end is kind of thin. If you flip it over, there's always like kind of a thicker edge where you grip. Use that thicker edge for the coffee. You dip it in really well, and you hold it on your paper for a while and pull it off and do it again. Now, when you are using this method with the glass, the cup, whatever, or a cookie cutter, or any other item that you have that you think would work, that you're going to just press and release, these can go in your oven. Another way is actually using stencils. And you can find stencils you like, put them on the paper, press it down, and then use your hand with coffee and drizzle, or use a paintbrush and drizzle. And that would give you a design. You let it sit out for however long, because you don't remove the stencil till it's completely dry. Again, this is a no oven drying method because of the stencils. Other ways to get designs would be to use a piece of lace. And again, when you use the piece of lace, you dribble it with coffee, or you can dip your lace into the coffee wring it out. Just make sure it's wet but not dripping. Put it on the paper, and then put another cookie sheet, put a piece of parchment paper and another cookie sheet down, and press and then something heavy on top like a book or something, and that'll press the design on. Again, this takes a long time to dry because you've layered it with, you have the paper, the lace that's wet, you have a piece of parchment, you have a cookie sheet, and then you have something heavy on top. Okay guys, that's all the ideas. So let's do just a couple of these so that you can see how it will look. Another option before we go is to wet a piece of paper, pretty wet, and then wet a paintbrush with watercolor paint on it, and let the paint pick up the water on the paper, and it'll create cool designs. I'll show you that one as well. And I mentioned parchment paper. I love to use parchment paper because as stuff is sitting on it in the oven, or it's drying on it out in the garage or in a corner of my kitchen, that is another paper that can be used in my journals, on tags, even in artwork. So it's a great way to get two options of coffee stained paper, but with one process. Okay. I'm going to make this coffee real quick, and then I will show you a tip and trick with this that is really easy to do if you're using a big stencil. If you're going to use a smaller one like this, I'll show you that as well. Let me get all set up for this, and I'll be right back. Okay guys, when you have a large stencil like this flower right here, an easy way to coffee stain it, the pattern, is to take your crayon, go around the stencil just like you would on the big parts, and you may not get all the parts, but you can get some of them. Okay, and then you just come in with the coffee you've made. After you trace around it with a wax, then you can add coffee. You can do it with your finger, with a paintbrush. I'm going to use a spoon because this coffee's hot. And then we'll check it in a little bit when it dries. Now, for something like this type of stencil, you do the same thing, only you don't use the crayon because, it's too small. What you could do is use the crayon, color in all of the design, and then coffee stain the whole sheet, and these will show up as the waxy center or all over the paper, and the coffee stain will only be where the wax is not. And I'll show you an example of that. Let me get another piece of paper. Okay, so what I did was I colored in a few of the shapes off of this stencil with my crayon. I'm going to put this piece of paper in this bowl, and I'm going to put coffee in it. And again, because we're using wax, this isn't something that you can do in your oven, but you can see the marks right there. So that is another way to get a pattern on some paper. Now, if you wanted a natural pattern, something really cool to use is cabbage. If you decide to do the cabbage, use the outer leaves to boil to get that dark blue purpley color, but then you can take a slice of cabbage, get it to stay together, and dip that in the coloring, and then dip that, and you'll have all those weird cabbage patterns on there, which is really cool. All right, the last example I'm going to show you is the watercolor, because it's really simple to do and really easy. So I'll be right back. Okay guys, sorry for the angle, but I can't get the overhead camera on because of the cardboard. And that's a trick. If you're going to do the one where you soak the paper with water and you're just going to do it with a paintbrush, you want to have something absorbent underneath the paper besides plastic, because there's going to be a lot of water and you want to soak into something. I like cardboard. Of course, a towel is always a great option as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this little thing of water right here. It's just water. And I am just going to coat this whole paper really heavy in water. It doesn't take much to get it soaked because it is a inexpensive copy paper, printer paper. And as you can tell by the markings on the paper itself, that it is starting to get really wet. You can see it on camera. I'm just going to get it a tad wetter. And then all I'm going to do is I want a little water actually sitting on the top like that. I'm just going to come in with a watercolor palette, pick a color, and you just start swishing it around. You have to get a bunch of color on your brush, and then you just start layering it onto the paper. And the more water you put down, the more the color spreads out like that. And it's dyeing your paper. It's not just painting it. Okay, it's like a dye. And I'll hold that up so you can see. And there is a lot of water on there. Whoops. Let me wipe that up real quick. That's what I was trying to avoid. But you can tell how much water it is because I just dropped it on the floor. Okay, same theory. We're going to go over here to... Whoops, sorry, I moved out of the way. Okay, now we're going to do this side. And you would keep just layering water and a color on. Let me use a little darker color. Here, let me put some more water down. And let's use a darker color. I didn't think about that not showing up very well, but let's use... And there you go. Now you see it with the green. It shows up better. And once it dries, I'll show you how that looks. Now on this side, what I'm going to do is the same concept, only instead of using watercolor paint, I'm going to use a brown ink. But lots of water, and all I'm going to do is use the water to spread a little bit of my ink all around. So I'm going to get this other side really wet. And I'm basically just like pouring water onto my paper here, because I want to get it really drenched. Okay, and then I'm just going to lay my brush down. I'm going to come in with my ink, and I'm just going to lay down just a tad of my ink here. Like that. And again, you can see the ink swishing around in the water. You just use your brush to spread it around. You can also tilt your paper if you want to do it that way. Let me show you that. And you can just tilt the same way. And the trick with this method is just using enough water on the paper to dye it. You could also do this in a pan if you wanted to, instead of doing it this way, but you'll get to see how this looks in just a little while. So we're going to let this dry. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and learning about all the different ways that you can dye your paper. I hope I showed you some new and different ideas. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button with that little bell, because we have a lot of great videos planned for you this year. Next, coming up, of course, is our Art Wednesday. And on Art Wednesday, on Wednesday, we're going to talk all about colored pencils and how to use them both in your art and in your journals. They're great for mixed media. They're great for creating art on their own. They're also great for adding interest to tags, journal cards, journal pages, and anything else you can dream up. And then on Friday, we're talking journals and journaling. What are my options and what do I write? Some new ideas for you with new options coming up there as well. Also, down below, I have linked a couple of my favorite brushes that I got out of the Advent calendar from Arteza. They're amazing, so I've linked those down below for you. Also, this ink is really, really nice. It came from Blick. I'm going to link that down below along with the paper that I've been using to do drawings and small paintings that are going to be up in my that will be up on my art website soon. I'll link that paper down below too because I think it would also make great journaling paper. So all that is linked below, as well as some Amazon items that we used today, namely the stencils. And I have linked the shop, the Etsy shop where I got my tea and coffee stained paper from, because honestly I hate doing this part. I don't mind going back in and adding designs, but just it takes so long and I just don't like doing it. So I will link the shop where I got mine if they are still open. I bought this in 2020 and I still have a lot of it. So that tells you, I bought a lot and it was affordable. So anyway, thank you for being here. It means the world to me. Thanks for supporting my channel by either giving me a thumbs up, leaving me a comment, subscribing to my channel, or purchasing something from one of the links I provide below. All those help me tremendously build this up, so hopefully it can be sustaining one day. Again, you are all amazing. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.